Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
So I made one of these videos back in April, and a lot of you guys seem to find it very helpful. However, since then, I would say more than 50% of the boots that I ranked have now been replaced with new models. So in the name of keeping you guys kind of up to date with where I rank all of the latest and greatest football boots, here is my updated tier list of football boots for 2021. And with that in mind, if you are watching this video because you're on the market for a new pair of football boots, check out the new releases page on my website, which will be the first link down below, where you can find all of the latest boots with exclusive SR4U coupon codes below their normal retail prices. If you guys enjoy the tier list videos and perhaps want to see more like it, please don't forget to support this one with a like. Also guys, I have a goal of 750,000 subscribers by the end of 2021. So thank you to everyone that is subscribed to the channel and watches the content regularly. But if you're not subscribed, it would mean the world to me if you could hit that subscribe button along with a little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. The Puma King Platinum 21 is the first redesign that we've seen since the return of the King with the Puma King Platinum, which was an excellent pair of football boots. And for the 21 generation, I think Puma attempted to build on a lot of the same concepts, given that this boot features pretty well all the same elements with the kangaroo leather upper, the central lacing system, the simple sleek look, as well as the mostly conical stud pattern. However, it does all of those things worse. The kangaroo leather upper is much stiffer than it should be, and honestly, the boots as a whole just have a bulky sensation more so than any other top-end model that's currently available, which I just think is unacceptable and honestly not very appealing when you consider your other options out there. I find them less comfortable than the previous Puma King Platinum. They're not as lightweight. The sole plate I don't think feels as good either. And even though it's still a decent value at $200, it's less expensive than all of its competition. It's just not a football boot that I'm personally a big fan of, and one that I would probably avoid. For me, the King Platinum 21 is D tier. The Adidas Copa Sense Point 1 is another pair of football boots that I'm not a big fan of, considering that this is their top-end laced option with a kangaroo leather upper, bearing the Copa name. The amount of leather that you get, while decent quality, is laughable. It's literally just the toe area and part of the forefoot that has leather. Everything else is this stiffer kind of textile-based material that honestly just doesn't feel very comfortable on your feet. Pair that up with the SensePod heel liner, and again, you kind of have a recipe for a football boot that just doesn't feel good, and a football boot with a kangaroo leather upper should feel good the second that you put them on. The sole plate and stud pattern, like I said, very average and perhaps bulkier than it should be, and when you compare this to its competition, I guess the King Platinum 21 makes a lot of the same mistakes, but then if you look at the new Tiempo, that just makes this boot look even worse and a lot less compelling than it already did. I ranked this previously in D tier. I think that's pretty low, and I think it stays in D tier. The Adidas Copa Sense Plus, a football boot that came out around the time that I made the previous tier list, and I think there were people that maybe thought I was a little bit harsh on this football boot, but quite honestly, all these months later, I honestly don't think I was harsh enough. This is a football boot that has some great ideas and some great concepts about it, and I think the overall shape of the upper, they got just right, but the lack of leather on a $275 football boot bearing the Copa name, I think is just unacceptable. This SensePod system through the heel, it seems to be the majority of opinion that it's not very comfortable, and it certainly increases your risk of blistering. A normal heel liner would have been a lot better, and for all the good characteristics of this upper, that's actually quite delicate in a lot of ways. It has this super clunky and borderline bulky sole plate with a stud pattern that is about as average as it gets. This for me, at $275, you pretty much have to just want this football boot because there aren't many alternatives to it, but I ranked it as C tier previously, and I think it's going to stay in C tier. The Made in Japan Mizuno Rebula Cup. Now, I've been accused of being a little bit of a Mizuno fanboy, but when this boot first came out, I wasn't overly impressed, although over time, I think this boot has grown on me, although, given recent releases, mainly the 9th generation of Tiempo Legend, I'm kind of a little bit down on this football boot again, in that everything it does quite well. Obviously, with the Made in Japan Mizuno quality, the leather, the memory foam, the construction of the boot, the comfort. I think this is one of the most underrated sole plates and stud patterns on the market. Absolutely love the feel of that, but the price is extremely high, and the amount of leather you get, I think, is a little bit insufficient, again, when compared to what your alternatives are. I previously ranked this as an A-tier football boot, and I think that's a fair overall ranking, but when you factor in the price and the amount of leather that you're getting, I think you can get the same experience, if not one that's a little bit better, for less money, which is why I am dropping this to B tier. The Nike Phantom GT2 Elite, this being the DF model. They also make it in a low-cut version, but they're effectively the same thing. The DF one just has some extra material wrapping your ankle, so choose accordingly. However, what I will say about the Phantom GT2 is I'm kind of underwhelmed by it. I was critical by the lack of change from Nike to justify even calling this the GT2. They changed up the generative texture pattern for something that is admittedly a lot more generic, but ultimately still feels the same in terms of being a thin Flyknit upper with minimal padding and a lot of roughness to the surface texture that does provide some additional grip on the ball. But when you compare it to something like the Demon Skin spikes on the Predator Freak series, it doesn't even come close. It's a good pair of football boots. They perform the part, they fit well, they're lightweight, they offer an aggressive stud pattern. There's really nothing that is overly wrong with them, but it's a football boot that kind of just blends into the crowd and does nothing exceptionally well. I rank the Phantom GT original model as B tier, and the GT2, due to the lack of change, is still a B tier football boot. The Adidas Predator Freak Plus, a football boot that is exceptionally unique in combining the laceless system with the Demon Skin 2.0 spikes scattered across the entire upper, providing a tremendous amount of extra grip on the ball. It fits pretty well. The lockdown, considering its laceless design, is quite solid. The sole plate and stud pattern, you could make the argument, is a little bit on the average side of things, but as a whole, it's a football boot that performs the part and feels super unique. I think objectively, when you're talking about lockdown and responsiveness and other alternatives, even within the Adidas brand in the Predator line, I don't think it stacks up quite as well because of the more expensive retail price, but it's still a solid pair of football boots. I previously ranked this in B tier, and I think it stays in B tier. The New Balance Tekela V3 Plus Pro. Now, of course, this is the replacement for the regular V3 Pro, which was a football boot that I thought was extremely underwhelming and ranked as the worst top-end model on the market. This is a gigantic improvement despite looking very similar. Whatever they've changed about the upper, it's softer, it's more flexible, it's pliable. This feels like a premium top-end knitted upper should. I think that the laceless system that they have here does a really good job of helping to hold your foot in place. Of course, it's still a laceless boot, so it struggles with laceless boot things like adjustability and potential issues with lockdown because you don't really have a true fastening system without the laces. But as a whole, the fit of the boot and the feel of the boot is a gigantic improvement, and I'd put it on the same level as other top-end laceless options out there, mainly the ones from Adidas, which of course are the most popular. It also carries over the sole plate and stud pattern, which I never thought was groundbreaking, but it's pretty good overall. For the price, they're less expensive than Adidas laceless boots, and as a whole, I rank this in B tier. The Adidas X Speedflow 0.1, which of course is the laced alternative in the new Speedflow lineup. I could make the argument that this is probably the football boot, if you're on the market for something from the Speedflow line, that's going to work the best for most people because of the adjustability in the fit with this lacing system. Certainly the lockdown and responsiveness is better because of the laces really helping to hold your foot in place. The upper is technically different, but feels relatively similar in terms of being super thin, but also remarkably pliable. I don't think it's quite as responsive as some of the other top-end speed boots out there, mainly the Ultra as well as the Mercurial series, because this material isn't quite as structured, but you could also make the argument that's a little bit more comfortable than those boots for that same reason. The Speedframe outsole with the stud pattern and the Carbitex insert is top-notch as it is on the Speedflow Plus, and they're also $25 less expensive than the laceless model as well. However, I think when you're talking about peak performance characteristics and I guess a sensation that only one football boot can provide, it's not quite as special as the Speedflow Plus, and I don't think it's quite the same experience as the Ultra 1.3, which is why I could probably rank this in S tier, but I'm not going to. This is an A tier football boot, but basically right at the top of A tier. The Nike Mercurial Vapor 14 Elite, a football boot that one might argue has much stiffer competition now than it did a few months ago when I made that last tier list. And while the previous generation X Ghosted and Puma Ultra boots were both really solid, I think the latest Ultra and the X Speedflow is that one step up. The question is, has the Mercurial maintained its same S tier status? And I have to be honest with you guys in saying that there still isn't anything else quite like a Mercurial in terms of overall fit. But when you're talking about absolutely everything else in regards to a speed boot, there are alternatives out there that you could argue are a little bit better or at least on the same level. I will also admit that the anatomic sole plate of the Mercurial series is still extremely unique, and the feel of their stud pattern is still kind of unlike anything else, but considering the Puma Ultra offering pretty well all of the same performance characteristics, but just being significantly lighter and less expensive, I think I have to drop the Vapor from S tier to A tier. The Nike Mercurial Superfly 8 Elite, pretty well the exact same football boot as the Vapor, but with some extra material wrapping your ankle that you pay an extra $25 for. Should you want a Mercurial and prefer having a collar, by all means go for the Superfly, but ultimately it's the exact same experience, which is why it also drops from S tier to A tier. The Nike Tiempo Legend 9 Elite, a football boot that sees the simplification of the Tiempo line for the first time in the last several generations, where one could argue that they've maybe gotten a little bit too complicated, where the objective performance characteristics have no doubt been great, but the leather hasn't necessarily been the star of the show. The leather seems to be the focus this time around, with kangaroo leather spanning the majority of the upper and the addition of memory foam inserts through most of that upper as well, even some additional texturing that isn't actually too far off the generative texture found on the Phantom GT series. The laces still run down the middle, but you have the modern element of the fixed knit tongue that wraps across the top of your foot very closely, minimizing bulk. The touch on the ball is soft and more padded than a lot of other football boots out there, but not lacking in feel. You maintain a low-cut construction, a super comfortable heel liner, and the sole plate and stud pattern, while technically redesigned, isn't that different from the previous generation and is more or less classic Tiempo, all in a package that is lighter than you'd probably expect it to be. I think this is an excellent pair of football boots. I would be very happy to wear them, but with that said, I don't think they are quite S tier, but it's a very high A tier football boot. The Puma Future Z 1.2 is technically a new football boot because it replaces the 1.1, but ultimately doesn't see much change. The only thing that's really different is the micro texturing you have on the surface of the upper, which pretty well feels the same as it did before. Nonetheless, this is still a great pair of football boots and a very unique one in terms of what it has on offer. I think some of the strengths of the Future Z 1.2 is its adaptability because of this elasticated strip of material, the Fusion Fit Plus band that runs through the midfoot, along with its unique lacing setup. It's a very soft upper. If you like a knitted upper that has that little bit of padding to it, this is a lot less thin than most of the other knitted options out there. It's also a boot that's going to work for a wide variety of foot types. I don't think its ranking has changed from my previous tier list, but it's still an excellent pair of football boots, which is why I think it's A tier. The New Balance Furon V6 Plus Pro is another super underrated pair of football boots. This is a brand that as a whole often gets overlooked, but I think they're becoming more and more competitive, and I'd make the argument that this is their best ever attempt at a pair of football boots, to the point where I rank it at the same level as the top speed boot options from Nike, Adidas, and Puma. I think what's great about the Furon V6 Plus is the knitted upper that is soft, is thin, but still has that little bit of padding to it. So for those that were fans of the knitted upper days of the Mercurial and even the Speed Mesh days of the X line, this is gonna be the closest thing to that from both a touch as well as a comfort perspective. I'd make an argument that this is probably the most comfortable speed boot on the market right now because of that upper, but it also has nice structure to it. The lockdown and performance characteristics are great, and given that the bladed stud pattern isn't that far off what you're going to get from the Mercurial series, it's extremely aggressive, all in a lightweight package. It's also less expensive than a lot of its main competitors, and again, just a phenomenal pair of football boots. It's not quite S tier, but it comes close. This is an A tier football boot. The Puma Ultra 1.3, while definitely growing in popularity as a brand, is easily the most underrated football boot on the market right now. For the $200 retail price, not only are these less expensive than their competition, but they do everything just as well, if not better, in certain situations. This boot is the lightest one that you can buy right now, but also fits extremely well and is remarkably comfortable. It's probably the thinnest upper on the market in terms of giving you the most raw barefoot feel possible, and the sole plate end stud pattern is top notch and pretty much as aggressive as anything else out there. You can really nitpick when comparing all of the top speed boots right now, but in terms of value for money and really just top level performance, the Ultra 1.3 is tough to beat and tough to criticize, which is why, for me, this is easily an S tier football boot. The Adidas X Speedflow Plus, a football boot that offers easily one of the most unique football boot experiences that I've ever had. I think the super thin upper with the laceless design, along with the quality of the fit and lockdown, considering how thin this upper is and the fact that it's laceless, is just so impressive. I've never been a big fan of laceless boots because I feel like what you made up for in touch, you lost in lockdown responsiveness as well as just general quality of fit, especially when you're talking about a speed boot that's supposed to wrap your foot as closely as possible. Of course, your experience may vary based on the shape of your foot, but for me, I couldn't be happier with the way that this boot fits and feels. It truly is fantastic. It's lighter than what we saw from previous generations of Adidas speed boots, and of course, with this speed frame outsole and the Carbitex insert, again, the responsiveness and general solid feel that you get underneath your foot with such a delicate upper that fits and feels the way that it does is unlike anything else out there. They're expensive at $275, but it's a laceless football boot that made me like laceless football boots. This for me is an S tier, no doubt about that. The Made in Japan Mizuno Morelia Neo 3 Beta, a football boot that is currently the most expensive of the regular releases currently available, which means that it has to do a lot of things extremely well in order for me to rank it highly. Luckily for Mizuno, it does everything exceptionally well. If you're looking for something that is in the speed category, but still has a kangaroo leather upper and a level of comfort that only leather can provide without lacking the modern performance characteristics in the textile material through the midfoot, the knitted one-piece construction, as well as an outsole that's not just super lightweight and feels really good underfoot, but also offers kind of a more, I guess, modern take on a traditional conical stud pattern that, while it might look quite ordinary, is more aggressive than you'd expect it to be, all wrapped up in a lightweight package with build quality that only Mizuno is capable of. This is, again, one of those football boots that really has no alternatives, especially given what Puma has done to the King Platinum. So for me, I ranked this previously in S tier. It stays in S tier. The Made in Japan Mizuno Morelia 2, a football boot that is admittedly not everybody's cup of tea in 2021, but again, I'm ranking these boots based on the quality of the product overall, as well as what your alternatives are. And I think a lot of people would like to compare this to a classic Copa Mundial, but it's not that. This is a football boot that has a very modern shape and a very modern fit, one that I think most people would find significantly better than that of the Copa, which has a very old school fit and feel to it. That's part of what makes that boot special. But from a comfort perspective, from a quality of leather perspective, the amount of leather that you get, as well as this exceptionally lightweight design with this unique sole plate that looks very old school, but actually feels quite modern. Obviously, the stud pattern is a lot less aggressive than what you're gonna find from a lot of other modern day football boots, and they're extremely expensive, but they are far and away best in class when you're talking about a football boot like this. I previously ranked it in S tier, and I have to keep it in S tier. These are just phenomenal. The Adidas Predator Freak Point 1, where it must be noted this is the low-cut version, but they also make a mid-cut model. No difference in price, no real difference in fit or performance characteristics, so I would rank them in exactly the same way. Take your pick based on whether you want a low or a mid-cut boot in terms of looks more than anything. But what I'll say about the Predator Freak Point 1, and I previously ranked it in S tier, the reason why I did that is because I think this football boot offers something that you can't get from anything else other than the Freak Plus with its laceless design. But with the addition of a lacing system, the fit of the boot is improved, the lockdown and responsiveness is significantly better, and the extra grip on the ball cannot be denied. There is nothing else on the market that even comes close. Yes, the sole plate and stud pattern is a little bit underwhelming compared to what else is out there, but the experience and feel you get from the additional grip of these Demon Skin spikes just cannot be compared, which is why, because there's no alternative and it does one thing just so exceptionally well, I think this has to say an S tier football boot. The Adidas Copa Mundial is a legendary football boot that's been around forever, will likely be around forever, and is an S tier football boot. I don't want to argue about it. And there you have it, an updated 2021 football boot tier list. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to support it with a like. Again, if you're on the market for some new boots, you can get all of the latest releases below their normal retail prices by checking out the first link down below. If you have any questions or comments regarding anything that I talked about in this video, feel free to leave them down below in the comment section, and I'll do my best to get an answer out to you. If you're not subscribed to the channel already, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. You can find all my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.